For this edition of the MacIver Newsmakers podcast, we're joined by Riley Gaines, a national activist for our girls and women's sports. Where should we start? So, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years, and you get, a lot of times you'll end up with there'll be a news event, and that'll be your 15 minutes, and, as you get further and further from that event, it loses relevancy. That is not the situation here at all. You had,
unfortunately,
you had an incident that happened 6 years ago now, and as opposed to that just fading in the rearview mirror, that seems to be increasingly relevant as time goes on. Could you just describe a little bit about what that incident was, and just a quick refresher, and how that's how that relates to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. Well, to your point, I wish it could have been 15 minutes and on to the life that I had planned for myself. But, of course, looking back now, I understand that's just not how God works. He laughs when you make plans for yourself. He very clearly had other plans for me. But unfortunately, this issue is still at the forefront because it keeps happening. Number one, girls continue to be impacted at all levels, all states, all divisions, all sports, and because Democrats keep doubling down, which I can't understand. But a little background on me. Look, I was a collegiate swimmer. I swam my whole life. I started swimming when I was 4, graduated when I was 22, so really dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport. Was very fortunate to reach the highest level. I went to college. Ended up choosing the University of Kentucky, where I very proudly finished my career as a 12-time All-American, 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time. 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. The list goes on, but again, just to really reiterate, it's a lifelong journey. But I'll flash forward. In my senior year, I was in a good position to win a national title, which of course would mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. Until about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022, when the NCAA released a statement, blatantly saying that they were going to allow a swimmer by the name of Leah Thomas, who is of course formerly Will Thomas, who swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania, where he ranked in the 400s and 500s nationally, to swim in the women's division. Of course, myself, my teammates, my coaches, my family, everyone saw the unfairness of the situation and how this was wrong and antithetical to everything that women's sports, that Title IX was created to uphold and to protect. But I watched that first day at that national championships as Thomas swam to a national title in the 500 freestyle. Again, beating out Olympians, American record holders. These are the best of the best, the fastest swimmers this world has ever seen, and he beat them all by body lengths. But really what thrusted me over the edge is when Thomas and I competed against each other in the 200 free that next day. And so you get on the block and you dive off, and we swam 8 laps of freestyle, and I touched the wall at the end, and I look up at the scoreboard behind me, and almost impossibly enough, we had gone the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, meaning that we had tied. We go behind the awards podium where the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself, again, him towering over me, and this official says, "Great job, you two, but you went the same time. We don't account for ties. We only have one trophy, and we're going to give that trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you just don't get one." And that was the pivotal point for me. That is when, of course, like I said, we knew all season it was wrong. We knew the locker room was wrong. We knew the silencing that we were facing from our universities and administration. We knew all of that was wrong, but it wasn't until this moment when this official reduced everything we'd worked our entire lives for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. That's when I could just no longer stay silent, and that's ultimately what led me to take that initial leap of faith and lend my voice and my face to this issue, which I still firmly believe there is not a more worthy cause.
So, to me, to a lot of our viewers, the people that we watch in this podcast, I mean, transgenderism by itself is just such a bizarre issue. It's a delusional fantasy, you know, as far as I'm concerned. So it's really hard to take the issue itself seriously. Take people who believe it seriously.
Definitely.
And you've got, like, you and your teammates, you know, no question, this isn't right, this isn't real, what's going on here? Yet all the institutions are all completely bought into it. Where is that disconnect happening, do you think?
It is amazing because you're right. Even knowing, let's say leading up to that national championships, knowing that we were to be impacted, it just felt surreal from a sense of, like, my team and I, we almost laughed at the situation, which I'm ashamed of now because, again, it's really not funny, but objectively, it almost is funny from the standpoint of, I mean, it's like an SNL skit, or it's like a South Park episode, or it's like a Babylon Bee headline, which, again, is objectively meant to be funny. When you're standing on the block, and I look over at the lane next to me, and there's a man standing at 6'4", 8-9 inches taller than me, his size 15 feet, taking up the entire diving block, visible from this side profile is, of course, his Adam's apple. Not to be explicit here, but I mean, also the bulge in his women's swimsuit. Like, objectively, that's almost comical. It would be comical if there weren't, of course, real consequences. And so you mentioned this disconnect. It is so crazy to me because this issue has been painted as one that is very divisive and polarizing, but that's not the reality. This is a unifying issue. It really is. This is something that majority of Americans across the board, even majority of the Democratic Party in terms of their voters, their base, do not agree with allowing men onto women's sports. But you have, of course, how the media portrays this issue. You have how corporations have been responding. You have how academia has been responding and how they have really infiltrated themselves into this. You have, of course, in terms of elected representation, where it falls almost entirely on party lines every single time. And so I asked myself, why? Why is this? And I think a couple reasons just off the top of my head. Number one, what drives everything in this world, it seems, is dollar signs. I think that's been made very clear, especially in regards to the medicalization side of things, where you have children, minors, kids who are being chemically and surgically castrated and sterilized for profit. I mean, really think about that. Like, I don't think it will be long into the future before we look back at this weird blip of time and accurately call that what it is, which is the biggest medical scandal this world has ever seen. All the meanwhile, doctors, insurers, surgeons, physicians, whatever it is, are very happily lining their pockets. It's really, really sick. So I think money is a big driving factor, whether it's obtaining money or the fear of losing money. I know the NCAA was terrified of a lawsuit coming from the other side. They didn't want a male who identifies as a woman to not be able to participate and then sue them for this policy. And that's ultimately what led me to sue the NCAA, because in talking to leadership, they said, look, we can't be sued. That's why we have to stand by this decision. And I looked at them and I said, well, I'm going to sue you. And that's what I'm doing, myself and now 19 other athletes. So we're hoping that's victorious. So money, number one. Two, of course, I think it's fear and virtue signaling. We have, I would say developed, but I don't think it's developed because I think that is a word that indicates progress. We have regressed. We have decayed so much as a society where we believe excluding women from women's sports is what inclusive really means. No, it is exclusive what's happening. But I think we just have people who like to be seen as kind and virtuous and compassionate and empathetic and all of these words, tolerant, accepting, welcoming. But in reality, and especially what I've seen from the other side, those who claim to be tolerant are the least tolerant people. So I think it's fear, I think it's virtue signaling, and of course I think it's dollar signs that drives a lot of this movement.
All right, so there's a lot of reason for people, there are incentives for people to go along with this. You show me a 6 foot tall athlete with all the bulges, and you tell me that's a woman, I'm not playing along. I've never played along, and I never will. And you're of that mind too. You've obviously got a lot more flack for that position than I have. how have you been able to take this position? I mean, all your teammates, they believe the same thing you did, but they didn't jump in front of the cameras and say this is wrong and that's not a woman.
No, I think there were a couple things that maybe set me apart from my teammates. Again, that felt the exact same way, even still, of course, feel the exact same way that I do. Number one is certainly my faith. I mean, that's just what drives everything that I do. It is central to my life. It is central to how I operate on a day-to-day basis. There's nothing more important to me than living a Christ-like life. So while, of course, it is very obvious to anyone with eyeballs and a shred of knowledge they maintained from fifth grade science, understands that biologically men and women are different. Objectively, men and women are different. But, for me, it goes back to the first book, Genesis, where it is very clear he made them male and female, intentionally and uniquely in his perfect image. So knowing I'm standing for biblical truth is all the reassurance in the world that I could possibly need to stand firm and to stand tall. Yes, again, of course, the argument oftentimes that I make on the news or whatever it is from the objective lens, but personally, it matters much more to me that I am standing for what is biblical. So that, number one. Number two, of course, I have such an awesome family. I think that foundation is paramount to who I am as a person, whether it was before this issue in my athletic career or beyond. I am so grateful for having, two parents who love each other very much, who love me very much, who taught me how to be a leader, who taught me how to set goals and work to achieve those goals. All things I'm so grateful for. And I think the last thing that really motivated me, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, how could I, experiencing what I did, facing what I did, not stand up for my little sister? So that's a big part of it. She's an elite level gymnast. She will go on to do incredible things. I come from a family of athletes. My dad played in the NFL. My mom played Division I softball. All of my siblings played in college and beyond. My younger sister's probably the best athlete of all of us. And I'd never tell her that, but she will go on to do incredible things. And so I think just knowing it's bigger than me, it really is about the next generation. That was a large part in why I felt comfortable. And knowing, look, I want a daughter of my own one day. That's really what this fight is about.
So your teammates are one thing. A bunch of women that just want to swim and go to college and move on with their lives. But you travel around, you talk to reporters all over the place, you talk to groups like the MacIver Institute, but you're also doing testimony. You're working with lawmakers. You're trying to help form good public policy. So tell me a little bit about the lawmakers that you've met along the way. Don't mention names, but just their various approaches. Because I've in my experience, a lot of lawmakers are willing to accept the premise that a man can be a woman, and then they try to. From my perspective, they're fighting from a position of weakness. But I see that a lot, and I'm just curious, what have you experienced talking to lawmakers around the country?
Even people with an R by their name. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, Utah Governor Governor Cox, even Kristi Noem was a governor that at one point vetoed a bill that would protect women's sports. Ultimately, that would protect women and young girls. So yes, it has been remarkable and totally eye-opening. Like I alluded to, this is never what I wanted to do. I had no interest in politics, like most 20-year-old girls. Of course, I've always had conservative beliefs. Number one, I've always been a Christian, so those beliefs align conservatively. So I've always had the viewpoint that I do even still, but I wasn't interested. It was like the old men's job to fix all that, not my job. And I was totally naive to how our government operated. I knew nothing about our government, to be totally honest with you. I knew we had 3 branches. That was literally the extent of my knowledge. Even still, I don't really know what those 3 branches do. I don't even think they know what the 3 branches do, to be transparent with you. But I think back to 3 years ago and having this conversation. Even Republicans were terrified. They were terrified, again, whether it was to be seen as mean or hateful or to maybe receive a little pushback on social media. we've come a long way from that. There's a lot more boldness. There are more people at all levels, local, state, and federal, who are willing to be assertive and clear and use distinct language that I think really people are desperate for. For a while, this issue was confusing because words like trans woman are being used. And I mean, I think of my grandma. My grandma doesn't know what a trans woman is. Is that a woman who identifies as a man? Is that a man who identifies as a woman? You see these headlines of these articles where it's using she pronouns to describe a male. That's confusing for a majority of people. Now there's been a big reverse course. That's not to say it's perfect, and that's not to say there are not still issues that exist even from people on our side. But we've done a really good job in a short amount of time. 3 years, it doesn't seem that short, but in the grand scheme of things, a short amount of time to make it clear that men cannot become women and vice versa. Now, on the other side, they have been consistent from day one, even still, in doubling down. It is amazing to me. I was certain, if you would have asked me on November 5th, the day Donald Trump won the presidential election, I would have bet money on the fact that Democrats would slowly start to recant from their voting record, distance themselves from that, and recant on their previous position that they took. That is not at all what they have done on these issues. Whether it's this issue, whether it's tampons in boys' bathrooms, whether it's referring to Latino individuals as Latinx, they have doubled down entirely on what can only be described as absurdity. Total. I mean, these people are out of touch with reality that many Americans face. So they have been consistent in a way that is almost admirable. It really is, in how relentless they are. Of course, it's easy, I think, to unite behind evil, but the way they are able to stay cohesive and lockstep and oust anybody, we saw what they've done to Chuck Schumer following this CR, whatever it is, the way they are able to oust anybody for daring to question, for if they are not, unquestioning loyalty and total conformity. That is the Democrat way, unfortunately, it seems, but it is, I think, truthfully, Republicans could, in a much more moral way, ethical way, take a page from their playbook.
Yeah, I guess Democrats, they seem a lot bolder and more aggressive in public, but yeah, they might very well be more afraid than Republicans are.
That's true, and they should be, because again, the American people are waking up. We see the platform that they have built. It is entirely on identity politics. It is on corruption. It is on hypocrisy. The American people are now fully seeing that. I think largely to thank people like Elon Musk and the purchase of Twitter, right? That's where I think a big portion of Americans get their breaking news. I think we were denied that type of access for a long time, being censored on meta platforms, whatever it is. So we see it now. Calling everyone you disagree with a Nazi, it's just not an effective tactic in getting your point across. So
working for the MacIver Institute for Public Policy, I'm always trying to figure out good public policy, to support these positions. And the transgender issue, this, even with you not coming, even before you were coming to Wisconsin, it never goes away. I'm in hearings all the time, on these issues. And I'm thinking, well, something that Republicans could do that's really easy is just pass a resolution that there's no such thing as a transgender woman or vice versa. And I'm thinking, why won't they do this? And then I'm doing some Google searches, well, maybe some states done this. Yeah, West Virginia just did this. Not only was it a resolution, it was an actual law that a man is a man and a woman's a woman, and they named it after you.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
It's such an honor to have my name attached to something. I say it's an honor. It's crazy that this has to be done. Again, a law essentially codifying. President Trump signed an executive order declaring there are two sexes, male and female. This law passed in West Virginia and signed by Governor Morrissey does just that. It is actually South Dakota just did this week. So there are now 13 or 14 states that have passed some form of what is, in this case, in West Virginia, called the Riley-Gaines Act. Other states call it the Women's Bill of Rights. Again, merely defining male, female, man, woman, girl, boy, mother, father, defining sex itself. Because what we've seen over the past few years, really going on much longer than that, which I don't think people realized intentionally, of course, including myself. Let me be very clear. I didn't know this was happening behind closed doors for a very long time, but we've seen unelected bureaucrats go through the back door and reinterpret words to mean what they want them to mean, equating sex with gender, which those words do not mean the same thing, using them synonymously, interchangeably. That's how Joe Biden was able to perform and implement the radical rewrite of Title IX that he did, saying that, look, sex and gender mean the same thing, so where this says we're not preventing, or we will be preventing sex-based discrimination, we're actually going to be preventing discrimination on the basis of gender identity. So men can join women's sports teams. Men can have access to women's locker rooms. All of the things that come with that, of course, which is, again, in total contrast and in direct conflict to what Title IX was passed coming up on 53 years ago to do. So that's why pieces of legislation like this, President Trump's executive order, is crucial. Now, his EO, all of his EOs, I know you know this. I would imagine many of your listeners know, given the fact that they're tuned in, that they're listening here. Executive orders don't mean much in terms of longevity, right? God forbid, someone like Jasmine Crockett, who has become the Democrat mouthpiece, which I can't for the life of me understand, but I guess by all means, please keep using her. God forbid she gets into the Oval Office in 4 years. These executive orders would be overturned just as quickly as they were instated. So it doesn't absolve states from doing what they need to do, which is why we need states like West Virginia to pass things like the Riley-Gaines Act. And it certainly doesn't, it doesn't codify these into law at the federal standpoint. So we need legislation to still continue to move through both legislative chambers, the House and the Senate, and get onto President Trump's desk to sign into law permanently.
So, we were talking about how Democrats are all lockstep on this. Whether they believe it or not privately, they all publicly believe it. And Republicans and a lot of conservatives have just kind of been like wavering back and forth. One of the things I really love about these resolutions is it forces them to all get in line too.
Yeah, it does.
And it gives me hope that we are starting to solidify our position.
Definitely.
So I take it you agree with that? You're seeing that? I mean, like, how have you been kind of watching people grow a backbone on this issue, especially recently?
It's a good way to put it because, again, majority of people, I don't think public opinion has shifted that much on this topic. Maybe a little bit. Maybe we've won over some moderate voters or some even people who would call themselves lifelong liberals with the gender ideology movement and the harm that it's done. But I really don't think public opinion has shifted that much. Now people are just willing to say it out loud. And that just shows you that courage begets courage. It shows you that one person who is willing to, in this case, speak the truth, that might give the ability and kind of, support for another person to be able to speak the truth. And there's strength in numbers. That's what we've realized. So I do think we are seeing this newfound sense of unity within the Republican Party. Again, like politics is relatively new for me. I've always been tuned in enough to know what's going on. I would say even prior to this, like more than your average 20-year-old girl, but even still, like not enough to really know what's going on behind the scenes. But what I do know in my 24 years of life at this point, the past 16, bar 4 years of President Trump, and now, of course, leading up to January 20th, we were under Democrat leadership almost my entire adult life. And I've never seen them in disarray until now. And I've never seen the Republicans in unity until now. So I think there's a newfound sense of just optimism and hope for the future. I think that it's unfortunate that it requires awful things happening, whether it is the border, whatever the situation is, whether it's the economy, whether it's having, again, the morally decayed so much that you are allowing boys into girls' locker rooms as they undress. I think it takes these unfortunate circumstances happening before ultimately we do unite. So I just want to send the forceful message, look, yes, we are in control now from the standpoint of having the White House, the Senate, of course, Congress, the House. But do not become complacent. It's almost inevitable, right? Success, it breeds complacency, but complacency breeds failure. It is the enemy to growth. It is the enemy to progress. And again, it's what the Democrats have historically done really well, is they're relentless. They don't roll over. They don't allow themselves to be steamrolled. I hope that's something that we learn, and it's especially important here in this state, in Wisconsin, where, of course, there was a big election just a few months ago. People are fatigued. I'm sure people in Wisconsin are tired of the phone calls and the emails and the door knocking and everything that comes with the election, and especially living in a swing state. But there's a real ability to continue to have impact in this race that's coming up. Early voting starts, now, but coming up on April 1st. Really, really important to continue to ultimately shift the culture. And again, that's how you win the country.
Now, I think you and I are the same mind that we thought, Democrats were just going to milk this issue until they couldn't get anything else out of it, then pretend like it never existed. And a lot of us thought, Trump coming in office, we're going to wake up one day and they're going to tell us we're crazy forever thinking that they thought this. Obviously that hasn't happened yet. Do you think it's going to happen someday? Are they going to go down with the ship on this, or are they someday going to completely change course?
They just continue to surprise me. I will say we've seen, basically Gavin Newsom started like the Democratic Party's civil war of 2025 just last week when he, in a podcast with Charlie Kirk, he said, look, the issue of men playing in women's sports is deeply unfair. Not just unfair, he said it is deeply unfair. And what ensued from that, again, he's getting denounced by Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and all of these Democrat leaders. So there's not a lot of indication as to what they will do. I think at this point, I think this is the hill they're willing to die on, which again is remarkable to me because it is so far, obviously, number one, it's just wrong. It's just wrong from the standpoint of objectively, again, biblically, morally. They're on the wrong side of history here. But take away that, it's not how majority of Americans feel about this. But they're committed. They really are. We've seen now, but it shows. The recent polling shows what they have, a 27% favorability approval rating. The only people who have a worse approval rating is like Putin. Like it's honestly impressive how remarkably unliked they are. But it's because of issues like this. So I think they'll continue to double down. We haven't seen up until this point, up until Gavin Newsom, any glimpse that they would recant. I do think what we saw from Kamala Harris in the election, she did not want to talk about this issue in her campaign. She desperately ran, and it was President Trump's most effective ad, right? The one that said Donald Trump is for, or is it Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you.
Oh, yeah.
The best ad he had. So again, it shows you how the majority of American people feel.
So, you're a rallying point on this issue for conservatives, for the right, for Republicans. As long as this issue's around, you're relevant, and what you say.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So, do you ever see a day where you can ride off into the sunset and have your life back?
It's of course, like I said, not what I wanted to do, not what I prepared for, but I have such a passion now. Of course, for this issue, for women, for girls, for common sense and sanity and the truth, but for this country. Like it's amazing when you have your eyes opened. It's really hard to turn away. So I was in dental school before this. I was actually studying to be an endodontist, which is a specialized dentist who performs root canals. That's what I had planned. I can't imagine going back to school. Of course, I have some more school to finish up. I can't imagine sitting behind a desk and taking a test again. That so does not sound fun. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Whether that's way down the line running for office. There's been talks. I've been approached several times now. Like, I hear you're running for office. We'll clear it up. I'm not that crazy yet. I think you have to be a bit clinically insane to voluntarily run for office. God bless the people who do, because we need good people. But again, seeing kind of the corruption and the strings that are pulled behind the closed doors it's it's pretty dirty and pretty messy.
And the pummeling you take.
And the pummeling you take from all sides. There's no way to make everyone happy when you are doing what you do. So the position I'm in now, talking on this topic, of course, there's like a very violent, hostile group of people who don't like me. But for the most part, I would consider myself well-liked among the masses because, again, this is an issue that the masses can agree on.
All right, just one last question. The left, they love attacking you over this. Are the attacks getting worse? Are they letting off? Or, I mean, what's their intensity like when it comes to you?
It's so crazy because, again, like my whole shtick is there are two sexes. Like that's kind of it. Like you can't change your sex. Each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, privacy, and safety. Like that's it. But for saying that, of course, you are met with, again, some of the most obscene, profane, heinous attacks you could possibly imagine. I've been in many scenarios where, I mean, I've had drinks poured on me. I've had glass bottles thrown at me. I've been spit on. I've been physically attacked. People show up at my house. I was held for ransom in San Francisco for like almost 5 hours through the middle of the night where these protesters demanded that if I wanted to make it back home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. I mean, like really crazy stuff, which again that's what they do because they have no basis to their argument. It's not based in logic, fact, reasoning, common sense, lived experience. Like they have to resort to violence or name calling or some sort of petty personal attack. That's all they have, which it deters a lot of people from speaking out because they see the treatment that I receive. I'm here to say, look, the support that I receive, tenfold. Anything negative, easily tenfold. So over the past few years, the attacks have lessened. They move on to other things. Right now, the thing that I'm getting a lot of hate for is I'm married to an immigrant, a legal immigrant, an immigrant who has entered into this country the right way, who has done everything correct. But under the previous administration, he couldn't get his green card for 3 years because he wasn't willing to get the COVID vaccine. Of course, even without his green card, he was still in this country legally through visa, advanced parole. There are other ways to be in this country despite being married and not having a green card. The left can't comprehend that. So they now are attacking me, saying that I'm harboring an illegal alien and that Tom Homan is knocking on my door ready to deport him back to England. And this is what I get for voting for Donald Trump. Well, guess what? The second day Donald Trump was in office, my husband got a green card. So like, it's just on to the next thing. But again, it's baseless.
Well, yeah, actually, I think that's great for you guys because it gives you something to laugh about amidst, their unrelenting attacks on you.
We read them, and it's like there was a real news outlet in North Carolina, like a news station that had reported that my husband was deported. I'm like, me and him reading the comments at home, I'm like, have you been deported? I just didn't know yet. Like, what? So, yeah, it's so silly, and these people are clueless. They have no idea how our immigration system works. Our legal immigration system works. And unfortunately, my husband have been on the receiving end. And while, of course, our illegal immigration needs to be fixed, we have seen a major reform in legal immigration, even in the 7 weeks, almost 8 weeks, since Donald Trump has taken office, which is a really good thing. So they label him as anti-immigrant. He made my husband allowed to stay here, as well as many, many other immigrants in the same position as him. So,
well, Riley, you've got a great attitude. You've got a great approach to this. Very glad that you're as outspoken as you are, and very glad that you're here in Wisconsin with us at the MacIver Institute.
Well, I'm so grateful for you guys. Of course, we see. I think a lot of people understand. They see the national organizations and what they're doing, but I'm here to say the grassroots organizations and groups and organizations like MacIver are so crucial to the work that is being done even still following the election. So just very grateful and blessed to be here with you guys.